I caught my parents stealing my dog's surgery fund and kicking him, but I escaped with him, and my grandma took us in to fight back. This is the story of when I realized just how far my parents would go to get what they wanted, and how far I'd go to protect the one thing I couldn't afford to lose. I saved my dog's life by refusing to sleep. It wasn't a choice, I had no other option. My family had a rule: lights out, no exceptions. But when my best friend suggested we find a new teammate because I couldn't keep up, I knew something had to change. What happened next? I learned how far my parents would go to get what they wanted, and how I had to outsmart them to protect the one thing that mattered most. I saved my dog's life by refusing to sleep. My family had the harshest nighttime rules of everyone I know. 8 p.m. This entailed turning off the lights and the consoles, and when my sole friend in the world suggested to our clan, maybe we should find a different teammate who can actually play, I realized I needed to find a way out. She was the one person who didn't mind that I was the quirky kid in school. Losing her meant losing everything. I learned to sleep totally still with my eyes closed, breathing so evenly that Mom's flashlight checks never detected me. Even my dog Max would sneak into my room and wag his tail as if he were pleased for me. But one night, something odd occurred. My parents arrived at 11:30 p.m., and through slightly parted eyes, I saw my mother open my piggy bank while Dad held his phone flashlight. "Take $70 from his piggy bank and $50 from the Pokemon cards he sold," she said quietly, calculating cash. Then came the part that made my blood freeze. Mom moved to my desk and picked up the jar labeled Max's surgery fund in my handwriting. "$40 here," she said, dumping it into her purse. "Max is old anyway. This money might treble during tonight's game." I felt as if I had been hit in the gut. Every money I made went towards their gambling while they thought I was sleeping. The following few weeks became a bizarre game of cat and mouse. At supper, I casually commented, "Max seems sicker lately." My parents exchanged a short glance that told me everything. Mom confronted me at breakfast the following morning. "Your phone was warm when I checked on you." She paid close attention to my face. "Must have been from charging," I said while pouring breakfast. "It was not plugged in." I paused for half a second too long. "Sometimes I sleep on it." "Body heat." She nodded, but I could see the skepticism in her gaze. My parents soon began testing me, demonstrating how they were documenting everything. "Explain this," my father asked one evening, giving me a photo of my charger. "Yesterday it was by your bed. Today it's by your desk." I shrugged, attempting to appear perplexed. "I must move it without thinking." He took out another shot. "What about Tuesday? Wednesday? Different spots every day." My throat dried up. "I'm reorganizing my room." We stared at each other till Mom called us to dinner. The idea of my knowing the truth drove them insane. They expanded their investigation with careful observation. "Found this in your trash," Mom remarked, holding out a Snickers wrapper like evidence in court. "The expiration date is December 2023. It's January. Someone gave it to me at school." "Someone gave you expired candy?" She placed the wrapper on the counter between us. "And you ate it at night after brushing your teeth." "I forgot to throw it away earlier." She knew what I was saying. I knew she knew. But she couldn't prove it. Meanwhile, Max's limp was becoming worse by the day, and we were running out of time. They began taking photos of my room every night, comparing the locations of everything from my slippers to my school books. When my Discord account appeared online at midnight, Mom treated it as a smoking gun. "Technical glitch," I insisted. "Discord's been weird lately." She opened my cousin's Instagram. "Is this a glitch too? You liked his post at 11:38 p.m. "I think someone hacked me," I mumbled. She just gazed at me, and I stared back, knowing the truth but not acknowledging it. The probe reached a climax when Dad revealed at dinner. "Bad news, buddy. You only have $110 saved for Max." "That's not nearly enough." They scrutinized my expression, waiting for surprise or wrath. Mom's fingers grasped the fork so tightly that her knuckles became white. They were frustrated when I simply nodded regretfully. Max must have sensed something, as he limped over and placed his head on my lap. The silence lasted so long that I could hear everyone's breathing. That night, I overheard them planning outside my door. "We'll test him again tomorrow night. Go straight for the dog." The following evening, at 10 p.m., they stood outside my room. Then I heard them walk over to where Max was sleeping near my bed. "Look at this pathetic mutt," Dad exclaimed loudly. "Can barely walk." "Probably won't last another month anyway," my mother said. Waste of money even trying to save him, should have gotten rid of him years ago. I remained motionless, but my entire body shook with wrath. Then Dad did something that devastated me. He took 3 steps and kicked Max's ribs. I shot up before I could control myself. "Don't you dare touch him!" They spun around triumphantly. "We knew it, you've been faking this whole time," Dad yelled. The room burst after months of lies on both sides. "You've been stealing from Grandma too," I added gently. "Phone is already recording." They froze. "Her banking app on my phone. She asked me to monitor it after the money went missing." Dad reached for my phone, but I had already clicked submit on the family group chat. That night, I overheard them planning outside my door. "Tomorrow night we'll say we're putting Max down. If he doesn't react, he's really asleep." At 11 p.m., they stood outside my room. Mom's voice broke with phony tears. "I can't believe we have to put Max to sleep tomorrow." Dad said, "We have no choice. There isn't enough money." They must have sensed something because they burst through the door. I was sitting up, phone in hand, and recording everything. "You monsters. How could you put Max down?" I yelled. "We knew it. You've been faking this whole time," Dad yelled back. The room burst after months of lies on both sides. "You've been stealing from Grandma too," I added gently. "Her banking app on my phone. She asked me to monitor it after the money went missing." Dad reached for my phone, but I had already clicked submit on the family group chat. The message went through, and my phone began to buzz with notifications from aunts, uncles and cousins who were all watching the video at the same time. Mom reached for my phone again, and I twisted away from her, sliding backward toward my bedroom door, as Max cowered behind my legs. Dad's face got red, and he began yelling something about respect, but I couldn't hear him through the blood hammering in my ears. My phone started lighting up with texts, and I saw Grandma's name appear, indicating that she was on her way right now. Mom grabbed at me again, and this time her nails grazed my arm as I dodged across the corridor. Max limped after me as fast as he could, while Dad threatened to take away my phone forever. I dashed into the bathroom and slammed the door shut, twisting the lock just as Dad's punch struck the wood. Max was shivering against my leg, so I dropped to my knees to see where Dad had booted him. His ribs felt fine, but when I touched the region, he moaned and trembled. Through the door, I could hear Mom on her phone, her voice high and frightened as she tried to explain to someone that it wasn't as it appeared. Dad kept beating on the bathroom door, asking that I come out and delete everything right away. My phone already showed 36 messages in the family conversation, and more continued to arrive. Some family wondered if this was true, while others were already angry. Mom's voice grew louder as she spoke to what sounded like her sister, claiming that we were only scolding the dog and that I was being dramatic. Max moved closer to me, and I hugged him tightly, felt his heart race as rapidly as mine. They spent 35 minutes alternating between threats and phony charming voices in an attempt to convince me to unlock the door. Then I heard car doors banging outside and Grandma's voice downstairs, followed by my uncle's deeper one. The front door must have been unlocked as there was yelling from the living room. Grandma sounded angrier than I had ever heard her, and my uncle threatened to call the cops if he wasn't allowed to see me. Mom dashed downstairs and the arguing grew more louder. I remained confined in the bathroom with Max, listening to them argue about the money, the dog, and whether I was lying. My uncle's voice became quite forceful, and he repeated the word police again. Everything went still for a moment, and then I heard footsteps approaching upstairs. Grandma whispered my name softly and told me it was safe to come out. I unlocked the door, and she grabbed me into a hug, Max still pushed against my knees. She ordered me to quickly pack my bag and she'd stand guard. I grabbed clothing and school supplies and stuffed them into my backpack while she blocked my doorway. Dad stood in the hallway, mumbling about ungrateful children and how we'd regret it. Mom only watched from their bedroom door, tears streaming down her cheeks, but they made no attempt to stop us. Grandma maintained her hand on my shoulder as we passed them and descended the stairs. My uncle waited at the front entrance and led us to Grandma's car. I slid into the back seat with Max on my lap, and as soon as the doors closed, I burst into tears like I hadn't in years. Grandma drove away from the house, talking on her phone to someone at her bank over the car speakers. She was asking about recent transactions and password changes, and her tone was worrisome. Max licked my face and cuddled himself on my lap, even though he could barely fit. Grandma continued looking at me in the mirror and said that everything will be well now. She said I'd stay with her and we'd figure things out together. When we arrived, her house felt calm and safe, but I couldn't rest. Max stayed right next to me on the guest bed that first night, taking up the majority of the area. I kept checking the family chat, where a full-fledged fight had begun. Some relatives believed my parents when they said it was simply occasional fun gambling and that I was exaggerating. Others were outraged by the theft and dog maltreatment. Grandma had written, asking everyone to give us some room so we could handle this properly. The next morning, Grandma woke me up early, saying we needed to get Max checked right away. At the emergency vet clinic, they performed x-rays and noted the bruises on his ribs. The vet stated we were fortunate that nothing was broken, but Max required surgery soon, and the estimate made my stomach drop. Everything costs $4,300, which includes today's emergency visit. Grandma held my hand and murmured, "We'll figure it out." I took images of the vet report and shared them on the family chat, displaying Max's injuries and the expense. Within minutes, Mom texted me privately from an unfamiliar phone, accusing me of destroying our family for a dog. My hands shook as I blocked the phone without answering. Monday at school, I couldn't keep my eyes open, so the counselor drew me aside during second period. She inquired whether everything was well at home, and something about her gentle voice compelled me to tell her everything. Her expression became more serious as I explained the stealing, Max, and my current living situation with Grandma. She stated that she was legally required to file a report with Child Protective Services. My gut hurt, but I knew why she had to do it. After school, Grandma accompanied me to the bank, where she discovered even more money missing than we had suspected. The bank lady showed us transactions dating back 6 months, totaling over $2,000. Grandma's face paled, and she demanded that all of her accounts be frozen and passwords changed right now. That same evening my phone began to buzz with texts from Dad, and I could see the preview, which showed long lines describing how they sacrificed everything for me and worked double shifts to provide me with a decent life. While Grandma was preparing dinner, the messages kept flooding in, each one longer and more detailed about how gambling was only for fun, and that they would repay everyone with their next big victory. I screenshotted every single text without opening it so he wouldn't see the red receipts, then placed them in a folder named Evidence that the counselor had instructed me to create. Max remained close to my leg as I sat at Grandma's kitchen table, watching the notifications build up. His tail was wagging slower than normal, as if he could feel the stress. My Discord finally alerted me to a message from Layla Kelly, who asked where I'd been for the past 3 nights because our clan was attempting to raid without me. My fingers shook slightly as I typed out everything that had happened, including my parents stealing Max's surgery money and kicking him, as well as how I was now living with Grandma. She reacted immediately, stating her parents were fine with my playing earlier in the evening since they understood my circumstances, and that having one normal thing in my life right now made my chest feel less tight. After supper, Grandma took out a calculator, and we sat down to calculate Max's surgical costs, which were $4,700 altogether. She shuffled money around in her budget, demonstrating that she could afford approximately $3,000, but I needed to contribute at least $2,500, which meant finding work quickly. I began scanning employment boards on my phone as she called a buddy who owned a pet business to see if they were hiring. And Max rested his head on my lap, as if he understood we were doing this for him. My parents sent me more angry SMS for 2 days before calling me from an unknown phone. When I responded, a woman identified herself as the CPS worker assigned to my case. She needed to plan an interview and a home visit. Her tone was professional, yet kind as she explained the procedure and what would happen next. Grandma held my hand when I answered the phone, squeezing it when my voice became wobbly and answering inquiries about where I was staying and how safe I felt. The next day, while doing my homework, I heard a beating on Grandma's front door. Mom was screaming and begging through the window, pleading with me to let her talk to me. Grandma approached the door but did not open it, informing Mom through the glass that she was not wanted and should leave immediately. Mom kept hammering on the door, shouting about her baby and how grandmother was poisoning me against her. So Grandma dialed 911 while I recorded everything on my phone from the hallway. Within 15 minutes the police arrived, and I observed from the living room window as they spoke with Mom, who was gesticulating violently and pointing toward the home. The cop kept shaking his head before telling her she had to go, or she would be arrested for trespassing. Watching my own mother being escorted to her car by police made my gut hurt, even though I knew she caused it herself. Meanwhile, the family group chat had devolved into an absolute war zone, with relatives taking sides and debating whether my parents were addicts or simply anxious parents trying to have fun. Grandma wrote a lengthy statement about limits and offered links to gambling addiction resources, emphasizing that indulging them was not helping anyone. Dad instantly responded, calling her a bitter old woman who was attempting to steal his son, prompting my aunt and 2 cousins to turn against him and post about how they had also spotted money gone. 3 days later, Grandma drove me to my parents' house while they were at work, so I could grab more of my belongings for my extended stay. Even though nothing had changed, the house felt foreign and frigid, as if it belonged to strangers rather than my childhood home. We moved quickly, taking my clothes from my dresser and closet, my school supplies from my desk, and most crucially, Max's meds from the bathroom cabinet. I also took my gaming headset and the birthday cards in my drawer that had cash that my parents hadn't discovered yet, and stuffed everything into rubbish bags while Grandma watched out the window. That night, as I was about to start playing with Riley and the clan, my phone abruptly went out of service and refused to connect. Grandma quickly called her carrier and discovered that my parents had discontinued my line without warning, most likely in an attempt to shut me off from everyone. She enrolled me to her plan straight away over the phone, and we spent the next hour moving my number over, which felt strange relying on someone for something so fundamental as phone service. But I had no other alternative. The next day at school, the counselor assisted me in organizing all of my evidence into a coherent timeline for CPS, printing screenshots of Dad's texts, as well as images of my empty piggy bank and Max's empty surgical jar. We created a dossier outlining the pattern of monitoring, including all of their images of my room and videos of them testing me, particularly the video of Dad kicking Max. Everything was set out in chronological sequence, making it hard to refute what had been going on for months. The counselor stated that this would really benefit my case. On my way home from school, I stopped to a pet store near Grandma's house, where her friend worked as the manager, and filled out a job application directly at the counter. The boss appreciated that I cared about animals and had experience with a sick dog, so he offered me weekend work starting that Saturday at minimum salary. It wasn't much money, but every penny would go towards Max's surgery, and having something practical to do would keep me from going insane worrying about everything else. 3 days later, the counselor called me out of arithmetic class and led me to her office, where a woman in a gray suit waited with a clipboard and a serious expression. She introduced herself as a CPS worker and asked me to tell her everything from the beginning, while the counselor sat next to me, nodding. I told her the entire tale about the fake sleeping, the stolen money, and the video of Dad kicking Max, which prompted her to write faster on her notepad. She inquired about the surveillance images, how long they had been watching me at night, and if I felt comfortable at Grandma's place. After an hour of questioning, she indicated the case would remain open while they investigated and handed me her card in case anything further happened. That same afternoon, my phone began to fill up with notifications from the family group chat, where my aunt had set up a GoFundMe link for Max's surgery. Some relatives donated $30 or $40, but my uncle stated that we were only condoning my rudeness and that I should return home. The disagreement became so hot that Grandma had to block the chat for a time, but we had already raised $400. Later that evening, I got into Discord and saw Riley had messaged me 13 times, asking whether I was okay. The entire clan was online. When I entered the voice chat, everyone remarked they were delighted I was safe and didn't mind that I could only play for 3 hours. We played 3 matches, and for 2 hours, I forgot about everything else and focused on the game like any other youngster. The next morning, Grandma took Max back to the vet for a checkup, and the vet stated the pain medicines were helping, but we needed to have the surgery done within 3 weeks. We booked it for exactly 15 days in advance, giving us enough time to gather the remaining funds. The countdown made everything seem more important, and I checked the GoFundMe every few hours. 2 days later, I was in English class when the office assistant came to grab me and told me that my parents were there to sign me out. When I arrived, the principal was already on the phone with Grandma, and I could hear her say no via the speaker. Security had to accompany my parents to the parking lot while Mom yelled that I was her kid and she had rights. Now there's a big red note in my file regarding the custody situation, and everyone in the office is aware of what's happening. That night, Grandma attended her first gammon meeting at the community center and returned with red eyes from crying. She said hearing other people's tales about family members with gambling problems helped her realize it wasn't her fault for not noticing it sooner. She brought home booklets on enabling and limits, which we studied on the couch while Max slept between us. Meanwhile, the bank was examining the unlawful transactions from Grandma's account and asked my parents to explain where the money went. Dad sent me a lengthy text accusing me for damaging their credit score and their lives, but I simply screenshotted it and saved it in my evidence folder. The following week I had my second session with the school counselor, during which we discussed feeling bad, despite the fact that my parents had stolen. She explained that consequences are not the same as punishment, and that my parents were simply dealing with the inevitable consequences of taking money that was not theirs. It helped a little, but I still felt horrible seeing them struggle after what they did to Max. I arrived at the pet store for my first shift on Saturday morning, wearing the blue polo shirt they had given me. The manager showed me how to use the register, scan items, count change, and clean the hamster and guinea pig cages. By lunch, my hands smelled like wood shavings and disinfectant, but I didn't bother because every dollar would aid Max. When I received my schedule for the next 3 weeks, I figured that if I worked an extra hour or two before Max's operation, I would earn roughly $200. Grandma's lawyer buddy arrived that evening with a stack of documents outlining custody and guardianship choices. She said that since I was 16, the judge has listened to my wishes and where I feel safe residing. We completed all of the papers for temporary guardianship, with Grandma as my guardian, and the lawyer agreed to submit it at the courtroom for free on Monday morning. Grandma received a call from Dad on Tuesday morning, informing her that he had begun attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings as ordered by CPS. She put him on speaker, and I could hear the phony sincerity in his voice as he spoke, accepting responsibility and making adjustments. Grandma rolled her eyes at me across the kitchen table. After he hung up, she stated that she would believe it if she saw actual change, rather than just showing up for attendance sheets. Mom had not yet enrolled in anything, according to the CPS official who contacted later that day. She was still arguing that she didn't have a problem, and that Dad was the one who did. The worker stated that the discrepancy in their reactions was causing problems between them, which was unsurprising. That same afternoon, 3 of my aunts messaged me after seeing the photo I uploaded of Max, looking forlorn with his cone from the vet visit. They each gave money through Venmo, leaving remarks like, "For sweet Max," and "Get that baby his surgery." With my first paycheck from the pet business and what Grandma had saved, we finally had enough for the entire $3,500. I sat on the floor next to Max and gently embraced him around his aching ribs, telling him we were going to fix him. On Wednesday, a CPS worker came to examine Grandma's house to ensure that I was in a safe setting. She looked around my room, inquired about school, and made sure I had clean clothes and adequate food. Max followed us around, slowly wagging his tail, which appeared to fascinate her. She indicated that if my parents finished their counseling sessions, I could be permitted to have supervised visits with them. I nodded, but my gut tightened at the prospect. On Thursday afternoon, a police officer met me at my parents' house to collect more of my belongings for my long-term stay at Grandma's. Mom waited in the doorway, watching as I gathered my winter clothes, Xbox and schoolwork. Her cheeks was puffy from sobbing, and when I passed by with my last package, she muttered, "I apologize." The police stood between us, and while I wanted to believe her, all I could think about was Max's operation fund slipping into her pocketbook. The night before Max's operation, I pushed my meal around my plate, unwilling to eat the chicken Grandma had made. Riley continued texting me amusing TikToks and memes about dogs and cones to keep me entertained, but my hands were too shaky to type correctly. Grandma observed and told Max he could sleep on my bed tonight, even though she usually made him sleep on his dog bed on the floor. He cuddled up next to me, and I lay awake for the majority of the night, my palm on his side, feeling him breathe. On Saturday morning, we dropped Max off at the vet clinic at 7 a.m. for his surgery. The veterinarian estimated that it would take around 4 hours and that they would call when he was recovered. Grandma and I sat in the waiting area, sipping horrible coffee from their machine and browsing through old magazines without reading them. Other people arrived and left, picking up their healthy pets while we waited. Finally, at midday, the vet emerged, still dressed in her scrubs, and reported that everything went fine. The growth was removed, and Max would require extensive rest, but he should recover completely. I started crying right there in the waiting room, and Grandma drew me into an embrace that smelled like her lavender perfume. Sunday morning, I shared a photo of Max at the vet with his operation cone and bandages on the family group chat. Even my uncle, who initially defended my parents, responded with heart emoticons. Mom texted from a new number I didn't recognize, saying she was relieved he was fine. I glanced at her message for a long time before saving the number without responding. Max returned home 2 days after surgery and required medication every 4 hours, as well as assistance with using the restroom. The school granted my absence request so that I could care for him. He was so feeble he could hardly stand, but when he saw me, his tail wagged so softly that it made everything worthwhile. I slept on the floor next to his bed and set alarms all night for his pain medicine. The pet store manager altered the schedule without asking, allowing me to work shorter shifts and leave if Max required it. My co-workers had gathered a box of goods, including soft blankets and special recovery food for dogs. Since Max couldn't have actual baths yet, one grooming employee gave me a bottle of dry shampoo for dogs. Their goodwill caught me off guard, and I had to hurry to the restroom so they wouldn't see me cry. 2 weeks later, CPS planned a supervised visit for my parents at their downtown office. Walking into the beige room with fluorescent lights and plastic seats felt like entering a different world. Dad appeared older, with heavy circles under his eyes, while Mom could not stop fussing with her purse strap. We sat around a round table, with the CPS worker taking notes as we discussed safe topics such as my grades and the weather. No one mentioned Max, the money, or the gaming. When the hour was done, we all stood awkwardly, and Mom extended toward me before pulling her hand back. Dad just nodded, and they left first, leaving me behind to talk to the worker about how things went. The worker asked if I felt safe returning to Grandma's, and I agreed while signing some paperwork for her report. Outside in the parking lot, Grandma was waiting in her car, and I climbed in, feeling as if someone had taken all of my vitality. We drove home in quiet, and when we arrived, Max walked over to me and pressed against my legs before accompanying me to the couch, where I fell. He crawled up next to me, despite the fact that his operation site was still uncomfortable, and placed his head on my lap while I watched TV without paying attention. The school counselor noticed I was quieter than usual the next day, and pulled me aside after our session to tell me that healing was a process. She showed me a graph with ups and downs instead of a smooth rising trajectory, and said that most children felt worse after their first sessions before things improved. Max must have realized something was wrong because he spent the entire evening within 3 feet of me, even accompanying me to the bathroom and waiting outside the door. 2 weeks later, Grandma took me to a community center where her gammon club was hosting a special family day complete with snacks and folding chairs placed in a large circle. I didn't want to go, but she thought it could be helpful to meet other people going through similar experiences. The room had around 30 individuals, including 5 or 6 children my age, seated together in one corner, looking just as uncomfortable as I was. The group leader asked if anyone wanted to contribute, and after 3 people discussed their stories, I raised my hand without intending to. I told them about the surveillance games, the stolen money, Max's surgery, and how strange it was to see my parents in that supervised visit. When I finished, one of the other adolescents came over during the break and mentioned that his father had done similar things with his college fund. We ended up sharing phone numbers with other kids our age, and that night, someone formed a group chat dubbed GA Kids, where we could vent without adults looking. 3 weeks after Max's surgery, I put his leash on for the first time, and we went slowly to the end of Grandma's driveway. His legs were wobbly, and he kept pausing to sniff everything, yet his tail wiggled the entire while. We made it halfway down the block before he began panting heavily, and I carried him back despite his weight of about 40 pounds. Each day we went a little further until we had done a full loop around the block, with him walking the entire time. At his follow-up appointment, the veterinarian examined him and reported that the bone was healing perfectly, and his muscles were becoming stronger by the day. Meanwhile, my parents were attending their necessary counseling sessions twice a week, according to the CPS official who called with updates. After 2 months of sessions, they submitted documents requesting more visitation, and the judge granted 1 unsupervised visit per week at a public setting. The first meeting was at a downtown coffee shop, where they were already sitting at a corner table when Grandma dropped me off. When I stepped in, Dad stood up but appeared hesitant whether to hug me, so we performed this awkward half-wave instead. Mom had purchased my favorite drink, which was sitting at my seat and becoming cold because I was 5 minutes late from nearly backing out in the parking lot. We discussed safe topics such as a TV show we used to watch and how the coffee shop had changed since last year. Nobody addressed gambling, Max, or money until the very end, when Mom indicated they were working so hard to change. I nodded and said I had to leave since Grandma was waiting, and I walked out, unsure whether I wanted them to change, or to stay angry indefinitely. School was different living at Grandma's house without the exhaustion of pretending to sleep every night. My chemistry teacher approached me after class to say she had observed my test results improving and asked if I had obtained a tutor. I simply stated that things were more steady at home, and she smiled as if she understood without further explanation. My English essays received higher grades, and arithmetic began to make more sense once I could focus, instead of worried about that night's surveillance games. The report card that arrived 3 months later had all B's and 2 A's, the greatest grades I'd received since middle school. Grandma attached it on the refrigerator with a cat-shaped magnet and took a picture to give to my aunt. 6 weeks after filing the fraud report, the bank called Grandma to inform her that their investigation was complete and that they had recovered the majority of the stolen funds. My parents had to sign an agreement to repay the remainder in monthly payments, which would take nearly 3 years to complete. The bank gave Grandma a $1,800 check, which she placed in a new account at a different bank across town. Dad texted me that night, saying the reparation payments would ruin their credit. but he was confident they earned it. 3 months into my job at the pet store, the manager called me into her office, and I assumed I was in trouble for something. Instead, she said that she was elevating me to shift supervisor with a $150 boost per hour. The added responsibilities included counting the register and teaching new employees, but I enjoyed having something to focus on other than family strife. When my first Employee of the Month certificate arrived, Grandma purchased a frame from the dollar shop and displayed it in the hallway next to my report card. By the 4th month following surgery, Max had fully recovered and was racing around Grandma's backyard, chasing squirrels he had little hope of capturing. His limp had gone, and he could climb onto my bed without assistance, something that appeared impossible when he could hardly walk. Watching him play tug-of-war with a rope toy or gallop across the grass made every difficult decision worthwhile. He still slept next to my bed every night, occasionally resting his paw on the mattress to ensure I was still there. One afternoon, I returned home from school to find a note addressed to me in Mom's handwriting on the kitchen counter. Inside were 2 pages of her apologizing without making excuses or blaming others for her actions. She wrote about beginning her own therapy outside of the court-mandated sessions and learning about addiction tendencies from her childhood. She said she understood if I never forgave her, but she wanted me to know she apologized for stealing from me and Max, as well as for all of the monitoring and lying. I read it 3 times before carefully folding it and storing it in my desk drawer, not ready to react but also not wanting to throw it away. When someone recommended that we meet in the mall on Saturday, the GA Kids group chat became a real hangout. 4 of us showed up and went around, eating pretzels and mocking pricey clothing. Nobody discussed parenting, gambling, or treatment. We began meeting every weekend to see movies or eat. Sometimes I just sit in someone's car, listening to music and grumbling about homework. Having pals who understood without explanations made things feel less heavy and strange. Spring came and went, and the family group chat shifted to photographs of gardens and birthday reminders rather than angry messages about stolen money. Some cousins continued to refuse to speak with my parents, but the majority had gone on to their own troubles. Dad continued to attend his GA meetings every Tuesday and Thursday night, and he began collecting the plastic chips that are given out for being clean. When he received his 6-month chip, he texted me a picture and invited me to the event when it was presented. I arrived at the community center and saw him stand in front of 30 other gambling addicts, relating his story of losing his family to scratch-offs and sports betting. His voice trembled as he remembered kicking Max and stealing from his mother and son. After the meeting, he approached with the blue chip and said, "Thanks for coming." My parents signed the consent documents without contesting it, thus the court date for Grandma's guardianship came up sooner than intended. We waited in the little courtroom for about 20 minutes, while the judge answered basic questions regarding my living condition and school attendance. My parents sat 2 rows back, looking at their phones, as the judge stamped the documents to make it official. Walking out with the legal documents in Grandma's handbag felt like a breath of fresh air after months. The animal sanctuary near Grandma's house wanted weekend volunteers, so I applied, citing my pet store experience. Max came with me after I certified him as a therapy animal through an internet program that only required a $100 charge. The fearful canines at the shelter relaxed as Max sat near their cages, wagging his tail and allowing them to sniff through the bars. One pit bull mix who hissed at everyone allowed Max to lick his face over the fence and even began eating again after 3 days of refusing food. Every first Saturday of the month, my parents came to Grandma's house for dinner, with stringent restrictions on what we could talk about. Mom brought dessert from the grocery store bakery, and Dad cleaned the dishes after we ate. We discussed the weather, TV shows, and Max's latest tricks, but never about money, the past, or anything important. The dinners became less awkward after the 3rd, when Dad stated that he had been promoted to assistant manager at his warehouse job. Riley messaged me about a gaming convention coming to the city 2 hours away, and her parents volunteered to take us both if we split the petrol money. Meeting her in person after talking online for 2 years was strange for about 5 minutes until she made the same joke about our poor teammates that she always did on Discord. We spent the entire day playing new games, eating costly pizza, and watching cosplayers pose for photos. She purchased me a Max keychain from a merchant who sells bespoke pet items, and I gave her a poster signed by her favorite streamer. Having someone who knew the entire story but still treated me normally made the convention the nicest day I'd ever had. My guidance counselor assisted me in applying to institutions, one of which had a good veterinary program, and gave partial scholarships to those with verified difficulty. The acceptance letter arrived in April, along with enough financial aid to make it work through loans and Grandma's assistance. She cried while reading it at the kitchen table and even posted about it in the family group chat, where both my parents sent congratulations messages with heart emojis. Obtaining approval for Max as an emotional support animal in the dorms required 3 applications and a note from my therapist, but the housing office stamped it okay. Junior year concluded with me packing boxes for college and Max following me around the home, as if he sensed something was changing. My parents attended graduation and sat with Grandma, snapping photos like a regular family, even though we hadn't been normal in over a year. Life settled into a good routine, with Max healthy and trotting around the dog park every morning before my shift at the pet store. College started in 3 months, and I had saved enough money for books and supplies thanks to my supervisor's pay raises. My parents continued to attend meetings and therapy, and Max slept next to my bed every night, his paw touching the mattress to ensure I was still present. My girlfriend chose her squad over me. Months later, the squad fell apart, and she demanded I come back. I gave her 30 seconds to leave. I thought relationships were meant for 2 people, but mine always felt like it came with 4 extra. My 27-year-old self had been with Jennifer, 25, for nearly 2 years, and while I once believed we had something special, lately it seemed like I was dating her entire squad instead of just her. We moved in together 6 months ago, split the bills and chores evenly, and tried to build a life. But with Linnea, Cassian, Murray, and Dorian constantly in the picture, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd become just another name on her group chat. And then came the last straw. For the last time, my 27-year-old male girlfriend and 25-year-old female chose her friendship over our relationship. I am done. I don't know where to begin with this mess. I've been with Jennifer for nearly 2 years, and I felt we had something special. We moved in together 6 months ago and split everything, even the housework, evenly. But now, I feel like I'm dating 5 individuals rather than 1. Here is the thing. Jennifer has a close circle of friends, including Linnea, Cassian, Murray, and Dorian. They name themselves the squad without irony, and they basically do everything together. Group discussions are active 24 hours a day, with matching Halloween costumes. At first I thought it was nice that she had such close pals. Now I'm wondering if I'm even in a relationship, or if he's simply paying half the rent. The breaking point occurred last weekend. Our 2-year anniversary was approaching, and I had planned the entire evening. We made reservations at the venue where we had our first actual date. I got tickets to see the band she's been obsessed with. Nothing outrageously pricey, but thoughtful items. I discovered her in the living room, looking through Instagram stories about her friends' weekend adventures. "Hey, so I've got something special planned for our anniversary next Saturday," I said as I sat down next to her. She looked up from her phone and I swear her expression was as if I had informed her someone had died. "Oh." She slowly laid the phone down. "Oh babe, that's the same night as Murray's birthday pregame. You know I can't miss that." My stomach dropped slightly, but I tried to seem calm. "Well, what if you asked them if you could reschedule for Friday night or Sunday?" She was already shaking her head before I finished speaking. No, you don't understand. Murray specifically planned it for Saturday because it's literally the only night everyone can make it. Cassian's got that big work conference starting Sunday. And Linnea's been so stressed with her new job that she really needs this, and Dorian just broke up with that girl he was seeing, so he needs us right now too. I observed her expression as she spoke, and she became more passionate, as if she was warming up for her argument. "We really need this night, Rowan. The group hasn't been together properly in weeks." "But it's our anniversary," I protested, and I hated how little my voice sounded. "This only happens once a year. You can see your friends literally any other time." That was when her entire demeanor shifted. She sat back, crossed her arms, and gave me the look that suggested I was being completely unreasonable. "Love can wait, but friendship can't. They were here before you, and they'll be here after." I was simply staring at her. The words struck me like a physical blow. They'll be here after. Not if something happens to us, not, God forbid, that we break up. But a casual matter-of-fact after, as if our breakup had already been scheduled between next month's group vacation and Linnea's birthday party. Despite everything we've accomplished together, I'm still just a transitory fixture that can be rescheduled around brunch arrangements. This is not the first time either. Instead of celebrating my master's graduation, she attended Cassian's housewarming celebration. My brother's wedding was last month, and she was too fatigued from a 3-day celebration with the squad to come as my +1. Jennifer was unable to visit my mother while she was in the hospital for surgery because it interfered with their weekly game night. However, she expects me to drop everything when she wants something. Last month she called me at 2 a.m. to pick her up from a dive bar across town since Dorian was too drunk to drive safely. When I arrived, she barely greeted me and continued taking selfies with everyone while I stood there like an Uber driver, then spent the entire journey home discussing the drama between Linnea and some man from the pub. The worst aspect is how she discusses our connection with them. I overheard her on the phone with Murray last week, talking about how I'm going through a jealous period and need to learn to share her time more effectively, as if I were an insecure teenager rather than her partner, who simply wants to feel like a priority at times. I tried to talk to her about balance and how relationships need to be nurtured. She always swears to do better, but then makes arrangements that exclude me. When I bring out the pattern, she accuses me of attempting to distance her from her pals. There is no victory. I'm writing from a coffee shop since I couldn't tolerate being in our apartment any longer. I spent the entire morning looking at places online. I found a decent one-bedroom around 20 minutes away that I can afford on my own. The leasing application is currently in my email drafts. I adore her, but I can't keep ranking 6th in my own relationship. My pals believe I should provide her an ultimatum, but honestly, I'm tired of begging people to spend time with me. Is it unreasonable to expect your girlfriend to occasionally want to be your girlfriend? Edit. Reading all of these answers has been very eye-opening. To everyone who has asked why I haven't just stopped it, you are correct. I keep hope she will recognize what she is doing, but she has made it clear where her priorities lie. I'm going to submit the rental application when I get home. Update 1. The original post blew up far more than I imagined. Thank you for all your help and suggestions. I wish I could say this story ended happily, with us working things out, but you'll see. So I submitted the rental application the same day. I got authorized within 48 hours, which felt like a sign. I spent the next week quietly transferring my belongings while Jennifer was out with the squad, which was convenient because it happened almost every day. By the time she recognized something was wrong, I had already relocated almost 80% of my belongings. She returned home at midnight on Thursday night, having allegedly gone to a new rooftop bar that Dorian wanted to visit, and noticed that my gaming equipment was missing. I heard her yell my name from the living room, her voice rising with each room she examined. Rowan, what the hell is going on here? Where's all your stuff? She found me in our bedroom, packing up the remainder of my clothes. She remained at the doorway for a moment, inspecting the room as if she were taking inventory of what was missing. Are you moving out? Her voice cracked slightly with the last word. I gave her the letter I had written. I tried to make it simple and honest, saying that I needed to be with someone who wanted to prioritize our relationship, and that I couldn't continue to feel like an afterthought in her life. She read it quickly, then gradually, her eyes widening. She gazed up at me as if I were a stranger. You're seriously leaving me because I have friends? Because I won't ditch the people who have been there for me for years? I sat down on the edge of the bed, tired. Jennifer, it's not about you having friends. Then what is it about? She demanded, waving the letter. Because this whole thing reads like you want me to choose between you and everyone I care about. I want you to care about me too, I added quietly. I want to feel like I matter to you. Like our relationship matters. She looked at me as if I had suggested something insane. Of course you matter, but I can't just abandon my friends every time you want attention. I felt something twist in my chest. Jennifer, I asked you to spend one evening with me for our anniversary one, and I explained why. That night was important, more important than us. She flung her hands up. This is ridiculous, Rowan. You're throwing away 2 years because you can't handle me having a social life. You knew who I was when we started dating. I looked at her, really looked at her, and understood she did not comprehend. In her opinion, I was the problem. I was being unreasonable. I thought I knew who you were, I replied, rising up and shutting the bag. I thought you were someone who wanted to build something with me. I do want to build something with you, but not if it means cutting off everyone else in my life. I'm not asking you to cut them off. I'm asking you to make space for me too. But she was already shaking her head, and I could tell from her eyes that we were going in circles. She interpreted this as me being domineering. I viewed it as fundamental relationship upkeep. There was no middle ground that we both wanted to discover. After another 20 minutes of repeating the same arguments, I raised my hands. I'm done, Jennifer. I'm done arguing about this. Done arguing or done with us? Both. The finality in my speech appeared to strike her. Then her entire posture altered, as if she knew this wasn't just a conflict we'd gotten through. That's when things turned weird. She began following me throughout the apartment, detailing everything we'd done together and the memories we'd created. Even so, every other phrase mentioned her friends. Remember when we went to that concert and ran into Linnea and Cassian? What about the time we cooked dinner for the whole squad? It was as if she couldn't even imagine moments that were only about us. I promised her I'd return for the remainder of my belongings over the weekend when she was at Murray's pool party, because of course, there was one. I left my key on the kitchen counter and walked out. But obviously leaving was not enough for her. Saturday morning, I'm in my new place, finally feeling like I can breathe again, when my phone starts acting up. Jennifer is phoning non-stop and sending paragraph-long texts about how we need to discuss things out like grown-ups. When I didn't respond, she started having the squad message me. Linnea sent me a long text about Jennifer's devastation and how I'm splitting up the family. Dorian called me immature for leaving instead of working things out. Cassian took a fair approach and suggested that we all meet to discuss matters. Even Murray, with whom I'd had maybe 10 talks in 2 years, felt entitled to tell me I was making a mistake. The messages became increasingly hostile as the day progressed. Things like, "You're going to regret this, and Jennifer deserves better anyway." By Sunday evening, they were labeling me emotionally abusive for leaving her without notice, despite the letter I'd written explaining everything. Then Monday night occurred. I arrived home from work to see all 5 of them standing outside my new building. Jennifer was in the front, with the squad arranged behind her like an intervention team. As soon as she saw me, she began talking so loudly that neighbors looked out their windows. "We need to settle this right now. You don't get to just disappear and ignore everyone. We're all adults here." I assured them that there was nothing to settle. I'd made a decision. I had given my reasoning, and I was not changing my mind. That's when Dorian came forward with this gem. "Dude, you're being a selfish piece of, do you know how much you're hurting her? How much you're hurting all of us?" All of them. I questioned what I had done to hurt people I barely knew. Apparently by dating Jennifer, I had become a part of their family system, and leaving her meant abandoning all of them. You could only image my expression while listening to this pure rubbish. It was the most codependent thing I had ever heard. The entire situation seemed strange. Chloe was crying. Cassian kept attempting to mediate. Murray was recording everything on her phone. For what? I have no idea. Jennifer just stood there nodding, as if this were all totally typical behavior. I gave them exactly 30 seconds to depart my home before calling building security. When they didn't move and kept asking me to figure things out like an adult, I went inside and did just that. Security appeared and requested them to leave, which they did, but not before Jennifer yelled that it wasn't over. It was 3 weeks ago. The calls and texts have now ceased, but I continue to receive messages from random numbers, most likely from people using someone else's phone. I doubt they would try to come to my building again. Building management is already aware of their presence. I don't regret leaving, but I'm amazed at how insane things became. Who takes their complete friend group to abuse their ex? What type of mature behavior is that? Update 2. Back with another update. I honestly didn't expect to be posting more about this subject, but it appears that life has a sense of humor. First and foremost, everything is going great on my end. The new apartment is amazing. Work has been busy but fulfilling, and I've been reconnecting with pals I'd neglected over the Jennifer years. It turns out that when you don't spend every weekend as the designated driver for someone else's social circle, you have more time for your own connections. Who knew? The true tragedy here, however, is what has happened to Jennifer and the infamous squad. My friend Callista works with Cassian, and it appears like the group dynamics have shifted. Remember how I said Cassian was becoming serious with his girlfriend Callista? Well, they got engaged 2 weeks ago. Callista has been vocal about her belief that the entire group setup is immature, and she has pushed Cassian to set better boundaries. Cassian, according to Callista, has been gradually withdrawing from the constant group activities, missing the weekly hangouts, responding to the group chat less frequently, and focusing on his romance instead. Sounds familiar? Jennifer appeared to lose it when Cassian stated he couldn't make their yearly weekend trip to the beach house since he and Callista had already booked a trip to see her parents. "You're becoming just like Rowan," she purportedly said, because God forbid that someone prioritizes their romantic relationship over weekend beach vacations. But things get better. Linnea received a raise at work that requires her to relocate to Portland. She's been attempting to schedule virtual hangouts and visits, but Jennifer's been icy about it all. Apparently she made a remark about how true friends do not leave the group for professional chances. Linnea naturally feels upset by this reaction to what should be positive news. Then there's the Murray/Dorian dilemma. I never got the complete story while dating Jennifer, but apparently they've had an on and off relationship for years that everyone pretends isn't occurring. It's happening again, But this time they're serious enough to want to date rather than just hook up at group activities. Jennifer is not handling this well because it alters the group dynamic, and she is concerned about what would happen if they split apart. So let me get this straight. When I complained about being deprioritized, I was being controlling and selfish. But now, when she feels devalued by her friends, it's a tragedy, and everyone abandons her. The best thing, according to Callista's girlfriend, who is pals with her, is that Jennifer has been going around telling everyone that everyone is pulling a Rowan on her. Like wanting to mature and form adult relationships is some sort of betrayal epidemic that I initiated. I don't think she realizes that no one is taking her seriously anymore. Meanwhile, I'm having real fun for the first time in months. I went to a concert last weekend with some college pals I hadn't seen in forever. No group coordination is necessary. Nobody insisted on taking an Instagram snapshot every 5 minutes, and I wasn't forced to leave early because someone required emotional support for their newest drama. It was revolutionary. I've also been seeing somebody new. Nothing serious yet, but Alara is pleasant. She has close friends, but she recognizes that relationships require one-on-one time to develop. Isn't this a novel concept? We had supper Friday night, just the two of us, and she didn't look at her phone once. It didn't occur to me how odd that was till later. But this is when things become really fascinating. 3 days earlier, I received an SMS from Jennifer. This is the first direct interaction since the apartment building confrontation. Hey, I know things ended badly between us, but I've been doing a lot of thinking. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime. I feel like we both said things we didn't mean. What the hell? I just sat there staring at my phone for about a minute, after months of pure stillness, and now this. It felt like being sucker punched out of nowhere. I did not react right away, but she sent another one yesterday. I know I made mistakes. I was young and didn't understand how to balance everything, but I've been learning and growing, and I think we could try again if you're open to it. I showed Callista the texts, and he simply chuckled. Jennifer apparently received word that I've been doing well, that I'm seeing someone new, and that I appear to be truly happier. Callista believes she is discovering that having a loyal lover was not such a bad thing after all. However, the timing is quite significant, as her buddy group is gradually evolving, and she is confronted with the truth that people grow up, and their priorities shift. She has suddenly expressed a desire to reconsider our relationship. Where was all this learning and growing as I begged her to understand my emotions for 2 years? I am not replying to your mails. I do not owe her a coffee date or the opportunity to explain herself. I spent 2 years trying to convince her to understand what I needed from a partnership, but she constantly dismissed those demands. I'm not interested in being her fallback plan now that her major social structure is shifting. Edit. Some folks are wondering if I believe she has truly changed, or if this is purely for convenience. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Even if she has gained some knowledge about relationships, I have moved on. I'm creating something fresh with someone who already knows what a partnership looks like. Why would I go backwards? Final update. This is probably my final article regarding the subject, but I wanted to relate how things ended because so many of you have been following along. The Jennifer text messages persisted for about a week following my previous update. Nothing forceful or manipulative, rather she was looking for the ideal combination of words to elicit a response from me. Some highlights. I finally understand what you meant about balance. I see it now. The group isn't the same anymore. I think I was using everyone to avoid dealing with real intimacy. I miss talking to you, not even about getting back together, just talking. The last one almost got me. We used to have amazing chats, particularly early in our relationship. But I recalled myself that good discussion does not imply good relationship, and I remained mute. Things came to a head last Tuesday. Alara and I were having dinner at this downtown Italian restaurant when I noticed Jennifer, Dorian, and Mireille sitting at a corner table. Cassian and Linnea were noticeably absent. Cassian was apparently attending a couple's event with his fiancée, while Linnea was already in Portland settling into her new life. Jennifer noticed me before I could recommend we go. Our gazes met across the restaurant, and I could see her considering whether to come over. Alara observed my tenseness and asked whether everything was fine. I briefly stated the problem. She was aware of my ex's attempts to contact me, but she was unaware of the entire extent of the situation. To her credit, Jennifer did not cause a scene. She gave me a little wave before appearing to engage in an animated conversation with Dorian and Mireille. I thought that was the end of it. However, when Alara and I were leaving, Jennifer approached us near the exit. Rowan, hey, I don't want to interrupt your evening, but could I talk to you for just a minute? Alara clasped my hand and said she'd wait by the car. Probably the most gracious manner anyone has ever approached meeting their partner's ex. Jennifer looked different. Perhaps you're tired, or simply getting older. She started talking swiftly, as if she had practiced it. I know you haven't been responding to my messages, and I understand why. I just wanted to say that you were right about everything. About the balance, about priorities, about what a real relationship should look like. I see Cassian with Callista, and I watch how they support each other, and I realize I never did that with you. I told her I appreciated her saying that, but it didn't change anything between us. I know I'm not asking for another chance. I just needed you to know that I understand now. And I'm sorry, really, genuinely sorry for how I treated you, and how I reacted when you left. It was the first time she'd apologized without qualification or explanation. She looked over to Alara in the parking lot, and smiled sadly. She seems lovely. I hope she appreciates what she has. And that was all. She returned to her table. I went to my car, and Alara inquired if I was all right. I realized I really was. The ironic conclusion to all of this. I learned from Callista that the squad is nearly finished. Cassian is completely dedicated to his new life with Callista, and he seldom speaks to the gang anymore. Linnea adores Portland and has found acquaintances through work. Murray and Dorian are now dating, but it appears that they want to get away from the group dynamic that has complicated their lives for so long. Jennifer has been trying to keep the group together by organizing activities and sending wistful messages about the good times. However, you cannot force people to continue in a dynamic that they have outgrown. She is learning what I tried to tell her months ago. That all partnerships involve reciprocal investment and understanding. When people believe they cannot be real or pursue their own growth, they leave. As for me and Alara, things are going well. She met some of my friends last weekend, and everything went smoothly. Nobody felt they had to perform or compete for attention. Just grown-ups hanging around and getting to know one another. She's mentioned taking a weekend trip together next month, just the two of us. The fact that this appears normal and exciting rather than selfish or threatening reveals everything I need to know about the distinction between healthy and unhealthy relationship patterns. I don't have any nasty wishes for Jennifer. I hope she can figure out how to make connections without jeopardizing other essential relationships. But I'm pleased I had the fortitude to leave when I did. Sometimes the finest thing you can do for yourself is refuse to accept being treated as an option.